Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 4th part of What If Naruto Gave Up After Hinata's Death. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto slowly dressed, still enraged by what the Hyuga family had done to Hinata. But it was two things in particular that enraged him. The first was that they appeared to do this on a regular basis. 2. He felt he was partly to blame for the beating this time. He should have anticipated that the Hyuga would not simply accept him. As he raised the black hood of the outfit he had brought just over 2 months ago, he let out a growl. It hid his features by covering his head. In the darkness, glowing red eyes glinted. "So, kid. What is the strategy?" Naruto curled his lip in a half-smile, highlighting one of his elongated canines. "We ride the Hokage heads to the house and pick up a few items. The Hyuga's ass is then open season." Arlia, who had rejoined them only half an hour before, grinned wolfishly. "I admire your foresight, young man. Let's get started." Naruto knocked on his parents' door again 15 minutes later. He took a deliberate step towards the building, cutting his hand with a kunai and then flinging it forward without pausing. His blood arced in the space between him and the door, splashing a few drops of the red liquid on the wooden surface. The seal reappeared, this time not gradually changing to yellow, but immediately flashing orange, signaling the seal's disarmament. Naruto had returned here on a regular basis since he had traveled back in time, and each time his blood activated the seal, it took less time for it to power down. Shinigami explained that the bright flash had gradually changed color, indicating that it was beginning to learn who its new master was. Not that the seal was sentient, but it could learn in some strange way that, frankly, Naruto didn't understand. However, as more of his blood was fed to the seal, the color gradually changed to an orange hue. Apparently, Naruto will soon be able to enter the building without having to go through any security measures. Naruto moved towards his parents' bedroom as soon as he opened the door. He'd slept in their bed instead of going to his apartment on a couple of occasions. It brought him closer to them, which he sometimes felt was necessary. It was an odd sensation. It made him sad while also making him happy. It was perplexing, but that wasn't why he'd come here tonight. He crept over to his father's side of the bed and yanked open the last drawer, revealing a book. It was a large, bulky book with over 1,000 pages. Each of the normal pages had slightly cramped and busy writing in his father's handwriting. But it was what was on the pages abnormal that piqued Naruto's interest. Every second page of the book was divided into 6 separate pieces by a series of small dot perforations for easy separation. And there was a Fuin seal on every single piece of paper, which could only be activated by someone of the Namikaze bloodline. His ancestors. This, however, would have meant nothing to him because Naruto couldn't understand much of his father's technical jargon, advanced calculations, and occasionally slightly rabid, in his opinion, ranting. Simply put, if Naruto had to rely on his father's instructions, he would never be able to use the seals safely for fear of blowing himself up because he had no idea what the damn thing did. Fortunately for him, his mother had assisted. Each page contained a simple explanation of what the seal did, written in red ink in a broad and flowing script. The descriptions of the various seal functions went something like this. The paralyzing seal does exactly what it says it does. Perfect for Jiraiya when we go to the bedroom. Naruto paused, made a mental note to test another of Arlia's special jutsu on Jiraiya the next time they met, and resumed reading. Chakra flash. Blinds those who have chakra vision. In case a Hyuga is looking at something that isn't theirs. Naruto blushed, absent-mindedly wondering why Hinata was always fainting, despite the fact that she had improved. Sleeping seal, beneficial for dreamless sleep. Activation causes immediate unconsciousness. For when Minato dreams about the battle with Iwa, Naruto smirked. Why would the fourth have nightmares about that battle if he was hailed as a hero for it? Killing another human being leaves scars on the heart of a good human being. Your father was a decent human being, even if he was a prick for sealing me in you. Even if it was necessary, killing so many in one battle would have haunted him for a long time. Naruto sighed, knowing Kyuubi was correct. He turned the pages of the book, reading only his mother's description. Causes pain, seals away pain, shocks its victims, freezes its victims, burns its victims, cuts its victims, turns its victims inside out. Wait, what? Naruto closed the book with a thud and a shudder a few minutes later. He could have stayed up all night reading this book, but he needed to get some work done. Naruto turned and exited the room, passing through the doorway before returning immediately. He didn't bother looking in his mother's bottom drawer because it was locked and, despite being a ninja, he had never been taught how to pick a lock. The academy teachers had failed to review that lesson with him. Rather, he removed his mother's katana from its stand and strapped it to his back. Apart from learning some of the basic forms with Jiraiya during his training trip, he had received no specialized kenjutsu training. Jiraiya had thought it prudent for him to have at least a basic understanding of swordsmanship after facing Zabuza and Kisame, both of whom were high-level kenjutsu masters. Although he had never actually used a sword in battle, he thought the training was well worth the time if it only meant he would know when to duck. What made him take it? To be honest, it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. But, despite his twisted logic, his reasoning was sound. He'd have to imprint his conversation with the Hyuga clan on their minds. Kunai and shuriken were effective ninja weapons, but they were also widely available. But if he showed up in the middle of the Hyuga compound wielding a high-quality piece of steel like the one in his hands right now, he could bet they wouldn't forget about him. Naruto walked out of the room with a wolfish grin on his face. He had a few more pieces of equipment to gather before the hunt began. When most people look at Naruto, they see a hyperactive, grinning, idiot of a prankster. They'd be correct. He was, however, much more than that. Sure, he was hyperactive, but that only added to his incredible stamina, which could see him through almost any situation. His grin was usually a mask to hide his true feelings. And he did it incredibly well, even fooling the residents of a ninja village, with the exception of Hinata, who was a special case. After all, shinobi frequently say that deception is a ninja's lifeblood. Yes, he could be a moron. In fact, he was an idiot at times. It wasn't just a part of his mask. People constantly underestimated him because he was an idiot. And he wasn't just a jerk. King was a prankster. Pranking was probably one of the only things Naruto ever really thought about. Along with fighting. After all, it took a special kind of planning to finish painting the faces of each of the Hokage heads without being discovered. Almost every one of his pranks involved the same level of planning. Surprisingly, this pranking was always dismissed as harmless entertainment. Because most of the pranks were silly little things, no one took the time to stop, take a step back, and consider exactly what Naruto had to do to pull off a successful prank. Consider the time he put that bright pink dye in the Inuzuka hounds' shampoo the day before their monthly bath. Hana Inuzuka kept the shampoo in her room because a similar thing had happened before, for all the good it had done her in the end. This simple impediment had done nothing to deter Naruto. He had first entered the compound through an open window. Then it was just a matter of avoiding the members of the Inuzuka household on his way to Hana's room, all of whom, it should be noted, had heightened senses. Avoiding their canine companions was a little more difficult, but it had been possible by masking his scent with some discarded Inuzuka clothes. He then crept into the sleeping heiress room and tampered with the shampoo, leaving no one the wiser. So, in effect, he had successfully infiltrated a clan compound, evading all of the guards, and gotten into the room, within touching distance of one of Konoha's clan heirs. It was really sad that in a ninja village, no one realized Naruto was already capable of performing all of the tasks required of a skilled assassin. Naruto was right next to the Hyuga clan complex. Waiting. Watching. Information was critical to success here. In this case, information about guard changes. The Hyuga clan was the only clan in Konoha that had its members perform actual guard duty. After all, it was tradition. And the Hyuga clan had always valued tradition. Naruto suspected it was because they were the only clan in Konoha to be granted noble status by the Fire Daimyo. Whatever, it wasn't all that important. The important thing right now was that, from what he could tell, the guards worked in 2-hour shifts.
Naruto was unaware of all the guard patrols inside the complex.
He'd just have to find them before they found him. Despite this minor complication, Naruto couldn't help but smile as they went about their guarding duties. It was just a routine to them. It's a formality. He assumed it made sense. The Hyuga clan was Konoha's largest, wealthiest, and arguably most powerful clan. Naruto laughed. With their all-seeing eyes, and unbeatable taijutsu style, they have grown arrogant, he thought. And he was correct. Although, in his opinion, most of them, i.e., all of them except Hinata, just had to stick up their ass. But their arrogance was also evidence of a fatal flaw that could be exploited. Overconfidence. After all, there were only 2 reasons for the presence of guards in the area. First, it was tradition, and second, it demonstrated to the other, smaller clans their superiority, in that they had the numbers to have guards patrol the grounds every night. But these guards didn't even act to use their Byakugan on a regular basis, instead only using it when they heard a noise or something suspicious. It was extremely laziness on their part, but it does explain how the Kumo representative came so close to kidnapping Hinata in the first place. Naruto came to a halt at the thought. Either that, or the Kumo shinobi had received inside assistance. Naruto shook his head to clear his mind of such thoughts. They were set aside for another day. He needed to concentrate on the here and now. The point was that the entire Hyuga clan's mindset had become increasingly complacent. After all, who would dare to challenge the Hyuga clan's might? In response to that question, one young, blonde, and irritated Jinchuriki would have raised his hand. As he had previously stated in the future, a long time ago, if not being a fool meant abandoning your friends, he would remain a fool for the rest of his life. In short, the Hyuga clan was making Naruto's mission far too simple. Of course, the outcome would not have been any different if the guards had been more vigilant. It did, however, make it a little more entertaining. Are you certain you want to proceed? Shinigami inquired of Naruto. Naruto simply growled. Shinigami went on. Remember, once you do this, there is no turning back. It is irreversible. Are you certain that's what you want? Naruto spoke up, his voice soft, icy, and deadly. Shinigami-sama was harmed. They were cruel to Hinata-chan. She's been working really hard and getting stronger all the time. But they don't seem to mind. Not in the least. And do you know why they harmed her? Shinigami was deafeningly quiet. Naruto gave a nod. Yes, you were aware, aren't you? After all, you were present. They now want to take her away. Naruto's voice had dropped to a whisper by this point, but it made him sound even more dangerous. It's not going to happen. She was once taken from me. Never, ever again, never, ever again. She is one of my most precious people, and no one, not even her family, will ever take her away from me. I'm not going to let it happen again. He jumped out into the darkness after saying this. It was finally time. He'd waited patiently until late at night, then more than halfway through the current guard shift, to a time when they'd be tired and lazy. It was time to get started. Guards 1 and 2 were stationed at the front gate. To be honest, Naruto didn't know the names of many members of the Hyuga clan. He hadn't spent enough time around the compound to learn their names in the first place. This would need to change. However, it could have been for the best. Naruto wondered if he would have been able to finish what he had set out to do if he had given a name to every face. Instead, he would simply assign a number to each guard. Numbers were far less personal. In full view of both guards, he trotted boldly towards them. Guard number 1 raised an eyebrow in a tiny movement. Even when no one was around, proper Hyuga decorum had to be observed. But he was still surprised to see a fox walk right up to him and his partner, only to sit down. It was remarkably quiet, which was unusual in Konoha. Foxes were not particularly popular in the village hidden among the leaves, due to obvious reasons. Neither of them, however, made any move to kill the fox, despite his partner's fingering of a shuriken. Yawning at them, the fox stood up, turned around, and lifted his tail, facing directly away from them. Guard number 2 flung his shuriken at the fox, hitting it dead center, with a slightly angry expression on his face. The fox that was giving them the brown eye vanished in a puff of smoke. Guard number 1 took a few steps forward, blinking in surprise, before turning around to face his partner. He immediately assumed the gentle fist stance. His partner lay unconscious against the wall, a small amount of blood trickling from a large lump on the back of his head. And a fox appeared in front of him, its hackles raised, growling at the Hyuga guard. You are within my divination range, the Hyuga said quietly, bloodline activated. The fox simply cocked his head at an angle and swiped a paw in front of the Hyuga. The Hyuga stood stunned as a wave of chakra exploded in front of that swipe, originating from an animal with no chakra system, as far as he could tell. The chakra wave hit him in the face because his shock prevented him from dodging. The world went dark, and he had no idea what had happened. When Naruto undid his henge, there was a small cloud of smoke but no sound. Only to reveal that it was a layered henge, as he had dubbed it. His 16-year-old self stood in front of the doorway, dressed almost identically to the one he had purchased. Despite the fact that he was doing more physical training than he had done previously, he needed the strength of an older person for this job. And there would be trouble if he was forced to dispel a henge prematurely and people discovered who he really was. That was taken care of by the layered henge. It basically meant that he transformed into something, then transformed again, so that when he dispelled the previous transformation, the transformation under that one would be revealed. However, it took at least twice as much chakra to complete the second layer, and twice as much chakra to complete the third layer. To put it another way, it wasn't entirely practical. Naruto allowed himself a small grin as he looked at the two unconscious Hyuga. He was growing fond of his henge. The fox form remained the most simple, and he was able to alter certain aspects of the original animal. For example, lengthening the tail to just over 3 feet, enough to wrap it around guard number 2's throat, and then increasing the strength of said tail to pull the guard's head back, slamming it against the wall he was leaning against before throwing the shuriken. Naruto was already aware of his ability to perform the Keizuken in fox form. Although it was probably a bad idea to experiment with jutsu in the middle of the field. All he'd done was add a little more chakra to the technique and play with the shape manipulation. He had made the chakra fat and blunt instead of thin and sharp. However, the end result was more than satisfactory. It had knocked the Hyuga out cold. Walking over to him, he removed the bandages from the Hyuga's brow and examined the red welt left by his jutsu, ignoring the curse seal. He appeared to have been hit in the head with a staff. Naruto grinned. Gazebo. He'd given his new technique a name. Looking down at the two Hyuga, Naruto created a pair of shadow clones, who transformed into guards 1 and 2 using henge. Shinigami spoke again. "This is your last chance, kid. There is no turning back once you cross this line." Naruto nodded and drew a special kunai from a sheath he had prepared just for this night. "I know," he admitted, leaning down and drawing red smile lines across each Hyuga's throat. After that, he dragged the motionless bodies into the compound by the back of their robes. He locked the unresponsive Hyuga in a side room with a key left in the lock, turned the key, and left them there. When he found the key, he sighed with relief. If he knew how to pick a lock, this would be a lot easier. The bodies would no longer be tripped over as he went about his work. He moved on, pocketing the key. Guard number 3 was standing outside in the garden, just below the edge of a roof. Naruto's eyes blinked. He had no idea one of the Hyuga would be taking a cigarette break. He shook his head. So be it. Leaping up, he grabbed the rim of the roof and yanked himself up in a single motion. He came to a halt, cursing. He was reminded of this roof. The roof was constructed using 2 different types of tiles. One of them was a regular person. The others were of a more delicate, yet more expensive variety. They were completely weatherproof, which was a unique feature. Any real weight on them will cause them to snap with a loud crack. Loud enough to wake up the guards, but not so loud as to disturb those sleeping below. And they were exactly the same as the other tiles. Naruto had avoided them entirely by chance when he first arrived on the roof. Naruto grinned. Most people would be put off by this. A small puff of smoke appeared. Fortunately for him, foxes are quick on their feet. Crossing the roof was just a matter of time. He could feel a slight shifting on several occasions, indicating that he had stepped on one of the trick tiles. However, none of them broke. Naruto leapt into the air as he reached the end of the roof, undoing the henge in the process. The katana from his mother's scabbard was drawn. The smoker turned due to the slight rasp of metal. He noticed a black figure with the moon behind him, holding a blade in the air. The blade was lowered. The Hyuga was destroyed. Guard number 7 was defeated by a simple barrier seal. Naruto had been keeping an eye on his patrol. He was more watchful than the majority of the others. Despite this, he missed the 2 pieces of paper, one on each side of the corridor, in the dim light. Electricity flowed through his body as he walked between them. Any shouts he might have made would have been muffled by the trio of silencing seals. Naruto approached him, revealing himself as he drew the kunai from its sheath for the 6th time. Guard 13 had also been more vigilant than any other guard Naruto had seen that night, opening and closing every door he passed. That was his undoing. A bucket overhead tipped over, splashing him with an unknown substance as he opened one last door. Whatever it was, it worked well. Guard number 13 barely had time to draw in a breath for a shout before crumpling to the ground. Naruto emerged from around a corner, kunai in hand. He was taken aback. He discovered the recipe for this concoction in a book left by his mother, which detailed a number of pranks as well as a lot of herb lore. He had wondered if the herb dosages were correct. A couple of drops of this simple but potent contact poison would knock you out in a matter of minutes. But with the amount he'd used, unconsciousness came quickly. Naruto used Henge to transform the guard into a fox after bending down and swiping his special kunai across guard number 13's throat. Foxes were always easier for him, no matter what he did. After lugging the first 10 Hyuga to that side room, he reasoned that it would be easier to simply carry a fox's body there. When he got to the room, he undid the Henge. Naruto looked around the room indifferently. It was getting a little crowded in here. Guard number 16 was yanked off his feet as he walked out from beneath a roof when a rope suddenly tightened around his neck. Guard 20 never saw the butt of the sword slamming into the side of his head. Guard number 23 never looked up, so he missed the figure lying flush against the ceiling, chakra stuck to it, blending in with the shadows. He had no idea about it until the figure landed on top of him. Guard number 27 was becoming drowsy. When a sickly-smelling cloth was suddenly pressed across his mouth, he fell asleep even faster. Guard number 30 never asked why guard number 15 approached him. He couldn't after the chop to the back of the neck. And so it went on, all the way to guard number 40. Naruto, now irritated at having to take so many foxes to the side room, led guard number 40 there himself, explaining that there was a problem that required his attention. Guard number 40 had complete faith in guard number 26 and followed him to the room, Byakugan activated. Unfortunately for him, several of the Hyuga rooms had been sealed for privacy reasons, making it impossible for him to see what was inside. When he opened the door, there was a blinding flash of chakra that was invisible to the naked eye. With his eyes closed, it was simple to strike him in the back of the neck with a kunai. Naruto pulled out the dripping red kunai after he fell. He hadn't cleaned it since the mission began. He moved on to the next phase after taking care of the guards and preparing the room. No one would interrupt him as he moved on to those who were sleeping because there were no guards patrolling the area. Hiashi was startled awake by a slap across the face. He opened his eyes to see a masked, hooded figure dressed in black standing over him, holding a katana in one hand. He opened his mouth to cry out, only to discover that he couldn't make a sound. He flung himself out of bed with a violent motion, sending a slightly sloppy J-Ken strike that was easily evaded in his sleep-blurred state. The figure made a seal with one hand. "Pain," he said softly, as if white-hot knives were ripping through his body. Hiashi fell to the ground. The figure made another hand sign with his hands. "Activate." Hiashi felt a chill run through his body. It wasn't painful, but it felt like every muscle in his body had suddenly become as stiff as a board. "Ah." The figure sat down on Hiashi's back slowly. "I apologize for not giving you a fair fight, Hiashi, but I've had a long night and I'm just not in the mood right now." He sighed dramatically. "So, I guess it's time for me to leave. There are places to go, conversations to have, and people to kill." Hiashi's stomach tightened at the final phrase. "And you, Hiashi-sama," he said sarcastically. "You are accompanying me." So saying, he grabbed Hiashi by the hair and dragged him from his luxurious bedroom, unconcerned about the small flight of steps leading to his door. He was only dragged for 30 seconds before the figure came to a halt at the first door he came to. "Hiashi, our first stop for the night," he said cheerfully. "Don't be concerned. This won't take long." He quietly checked the door. It was shut. Hiashi drew his katana and watched as wind chakra ran along its length. Gently and quietly, he inserted the katana into the door's wood and cut around the lock. The figure walked in, pushing the door open and sheathing his sword. There was no sound. He walked out again 20 seconds later, red liquid dripping from the kunai in his hand. With a flick of his wrist, he splashed several drops onto Hiashi's face. He couldn't even flinch because of the paralysis seal that had been placed on him. The liquid had a pleasant temperature. Hiashi's unblinking face was filled with tears. He'd been taken to 6 different rooms, and the process had been repeated each time. Blood stained his robes and his face, where a pair of tear tracks could be seen where his tears had washed the blood away. When he noticed a pair of guards walking down the corridor, he felt a surge of hope. But they did nothing but stare at him and smile cruelly. The figure crouched in front of Hiashi, seeing his despair in his eyes. "Henge," he said quietly. The despair only grew deeper. Hiashi was aware. His bodyguards were unable to assist him any longer. Hiashi was taken to another room because his hair felt like it was about to be ripped out by the roots. His kidnapper stretched. Well, this is the last stop before the big party. Despite the circumstances, Hiashi couldn't help but feel a pang of relief. He was afraid he'd lose his mind if this went on any longer. The door was attempted. It had been unlocked. The figure stepped inside, kunai drawn. Hiashi heard a gasp this time, followed by a muffled shriek in the clattering of furniture, before there was a gasp. Then there was silence. The figure emerged from the room, kunai stained red once more. "The bitch was awake," he joked. Hiashi's eyes were filled with hatred. Then he heard someone speak to him. "Hiashi-sama? What exactly is going on?" Ko, one of his more trusted branch members, came around the corner and looked at the scene in front of him, Hiashi on the ground, an armed specter above him. He began to yell a warning, but the specter simply swiped his hand in the air, and Ko collapsed defeated. Hiashi felt rage, frustration, helplessness, and, most of all, hatred for the man who had done this to him. He just sighed, oblivious to Hiashi's hatred. "I apologize, Hiashi-sama. We will have to make one more stop." "You," he said, pointing at one of the fake guards. "Bring him with you. We're going to the side room." Hiashi was dragged into the training dojo 3 minutes later, along with 7 other Hyuga elders, 3 women and 4 men. Their eyes were as lifeless as his, and their skin and robes were splotched with red. Later, he discovered that they had all made the same stops as he had. They'd all been in the room. The floor was sticky, wet, and stained red from 40 pale Hyuga bodies. The room's tangy copper scent and the red marks across their throats. Worst of all had been those with open eyes, those pale, unseeing eyes. The clone dragging each elder into the room had erupted in a small puff of smoke as they were dragged in. Cloned shadows that explains all of the new guards. The figure sat comfortably on a chair and made a one-handed seal. "Release," he said matter-of-factly. Hiashi's limbs regained strength, and he lunged at the man in front of him, hands outstretched, determined to kill this murderer. He was blown backwards when he collided with an invisible wall in front of him. Seals glowed at the 4 corners of a large square that held all of the Hyuga. "Please," he requested. "Do you really believe I'm that stupid?" Hiashi simply stared at the man. "Who are you?" inquired one of the elders. Hiashi was too enraged to even notice who it was. The man in front of him gave him a friendly smile. "Yes, I guess you'll have to call me something. Yurei is my given name." Naruto looked at each of the Hyuga one by one. He had them precisely where he desired. "Don't bother yelling for help," he advised. "No one will listen to you." At his words, each and every Hyuga stiffened. He smiled, allowing them to see the action through the movement of his mask. He noticed Hiashi and 4 of the other elders using their Byakugan to figure out who he was. Best of luck with that. He had already put the seals he had sewn into the clothing to the test. The Byakugan was unable to see through it. The seals I've placed around this area ensure that no sound will escape from this dojo. The Hyuga eased up slightly. They were concerned that no one would be alive to hear them. What motivated you to do this? Hiashi insisted. Yurei addressed him with a single name. Hinata Hyuga, in Japanese. One of the elders, an elderly man named Horinsa, blew up. That pathetic B*TCH. What role do your actions play in this scandal? You just sentenced her to death. The room was filled with murderous intent. It was powerful, stronger than anything Hiashi had ever felt, except the Kyubis. However, the killing intent of the Kyubi had been used against over 100,000 people. The killing intent of this one was divided among 8 people, with the majority of it directed at Horinsa. They were unable to move. One of the women, as well as 2 of the men, lost control of their bladders. Horinsa has collapsed. The figure sighed after blinking. Damn. It appears that I caused him to have a heart attack. In that same quiet, calm tone, he restrained his killing intent. Activate, he said, again putting his hands in a seal and walking through the barrier. Hiashi glared at him from a few inches away, and he couldn't do anything about it. He sighed in frustration, raised his hand over his head, and slammed a fist into Horinsa's chest. Once more. Once more. Horinsa sat bolt upright, gasping for air and in pain. You might have a couple of broken ribs, but you're not dead. Yet. Yurei walked out of the barrier and released the paralysis seal on the rest of them, slightly laughing to himself as killing with a look took on a whole new meaning for him. What is my daughter supposed to do about this? Hiashi inquired, his teeth clenched. Yurei took his katana from its sheath and examined its gleam in the bright moonlight. You understand, he said calmly. If there is one thing I despise, it is child abuse. That and rape, of course. Looking over at them, he let just a smidgen of his murderous intent slip through to make his point and keep them quiet during his explanation. Allow me to tell you a story. A story about a young girl who is innocent and gentle. She gave to anyone who asked, and her kindness shone brightly in the eyes of many. But this young girl was cursed in a way she never deserved. The curse of a noble clan, a family, he said it with disdain. This girl did everything she could to please her family, but it was never enough. They were always hungry for more. They expected her to perform better. So she gave it a shot. She tried and tried again. But no matter how much she improved, she never received a single word of encouragement. Instead, she received only scathing remarks and verbal abuse. The girl, who was naturally shy, began to withdraw from the world and within herself. She hardly ever smiled. She was never amused. As the undeserved abuse continued, she began to have problems. She was forced to fight her younger sister, against whom she could never raise a hand, even in self-defense, due to her kind nature. The abuse became more severe, and she began to be hit. Initially, it was just a couple of slaps or the back of someone's hand. But it made her more nervous, and her performance suffered as a result. Then her family, the people she loved above all others, started beating her up again and again. Despite the fact that she was well within her rights, she never mentioned it to anyone else. She never went to have it fixed. She suffered in silence because her family and friends told her she deserved it. but she couldn't perform unless she was healed. And then there were more beatings. She became more shy, introverted, and, most importantly, lonely. She had trouble making friends yet again because of her noble family. She lived her life unloved, friendless, and alone. Her family despised her. Her sister despised her, and her father despised her. He looked at Hiashi with rage in his eyes, which were a bright red. For the first time since Hiashi had seen him, Yurei's voice was tinged with emotion. Her father, whom she loved and respected above all others, constantly abused her, sent her into deep depressions, and almost drove her to suicide. Hiashi's pupils dilated. He was completely unaware. Yurei closed his eyes and breathed deeply to calm himself. Yet, despite everything, she remained gentle, kind, and loving, just like her mother. Yurei returned her gaze to Hiashi. Her life was more miserable than any of you could imagine. He took another deep breath. Then something happened. She made a new acquaintance. She couldn't be happier. She looked forward to every day for the first time in a long time. She was excited to be alive. She could smile and laugh again, even though she had almost forgotten how.
Yurei laughed lightly.
These were, in her opinion, the happiest times of her life. And she started to get better. She was still never complimented on any of her improvements, but the scathing remarks and abuse didn't matter because she had a friend, someone who accepted her for who she was. Then her noble family learned about her friend. He was a shady young man. Worse, he was the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, Kyubi no Yoko, the village outcast. He looked at their puzzled expressions. Yes, I am aware of who and what he is. When the beast was sealed, I was with the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Hiashi's pupils dilated. That meant the man in front of them wielded significant power. Yurei went on with his story. As a result, the noble family presented the girl to the Council of Elders. They informed her that she would have to wait a little longer to see her friend. Her heart stopped beating within her, but her friend had given her the courage to try something new. She took a stand for herself. No, she replied. The elders were enraged. They had been defied by the girl. They told her to cut all ties with her friend. She refused once more. As a result, one of them rose to speak. I'm going to the dojo. And it was there that this girl was forced to fight the elders. They were all masters of their respective styles of taijutsu, and none of them held back. She was told to stay away from her friend after the first elder sparred for half an hour. No, she replied.
And now it was the turn of the next elder.
When she refused to abandon him once more, the next elder confronted her. And the one after that. And the one after that. Finally, the girl had been beaten for 3.5 hours by all 7 elders. She was bruised, bloodied, and battered to a pulp. Yurei indicated a large bloodstain on the dojo floor. Despite this, she remained unbroken. She was finally displaying the strength that her elders and father had always desired from her. They, on the other hand, want her to be strong and obedient. Her father stood up after all the elders had finished speaking. For a brief moment, hope bloomed in her. Her father would undoubtedly assist her. As his foot kicked her in the stomach, her hope died in her chest. Another half hour had passed, and this was the most painful of all. Not because of the beating, but because of who delivered it. Her father, was the one who had done this to her. And she was told yet again that she would never see her friend again. Despite her heartbreak, multiple injuries, and blood seeping from her wounds, she found the strength to say one more word. No. Her noble family then threatened her with a seal being placed on both her and the boy if she did not comply. The seal would automatically activate whenever they got close, and this would happen to both of them. Yurei made a seal with his hands. Pain. He yelled. Screams erupted from every Hyuga present. Yurei cancelled the seal and resumed speaking. The girl finally agreed, worried not for herself, but for her friend. She was then healed. Not everywhere, but only where it would be visible. After all, a noble family could not be known to have beaten a child almost to death. When he was done, his voice was filled with contempt and disgust for them. So, what exactly is this? Horensa inquired.
Judgment.
Why should you care? Yurei raised his head. I care because she was once kind to me and stood up for me when I was pinned and helpless. I'm concerned because I value her. And this is not a verdict. This is just a heads up. A warning? Exclaimed one of the female elders. You think killing over 40 clan members is nothing more than a warning? Yurei took a breather. Perhaps, he said. But I think you're forgetting about all the little stops we all made on the way here. Takashi puked as the realization dawned on them all. Yurei didn't seem to notice. Perhaps I do. Hinata means a lot to me. I will go to any length to protect those who are dear to me. So, This is a caution. And believe me, if something similar happens again, there will be no warning. There will be a decision. No more physical violence. There will be no more yelling. I'll kill you if you hurt her. If you make her cry, I'll remove your tears and sell them to Kumo. If she is ever beaten like that again, I will kill all of those responsible, followed by their immediate family. You will allow her to make friends with whoever she wants, including the demon brat if she so desires. Unacceptable. Horensa screamed. This is not something you can do to us. Who do you believe you are? Yurei grinned. A trustworthy companion. But a dreadful foe. I'm the guy who broke into your house. I'm the man who took out every single one of your guards without even setting off the alarm. I'm the man who holds your and your clan's lives in the palm of his hand. Furthermore, if you do not follow my instructions, I will reveal certain information that I am sure you do not want the general public to know. In reality, Naruto had almost no dirt on the Hyuga clan, but Jiraiya had always told him that everyone has some skeletons in their closet and that if you were vague enough about it, they would assume the worst. He was, in other words, bluffing. But as he said it, Naruto raised both hands and rubbed the back of his neck and head, an old nervous habit. That, combined with the words information, led to a distressing, if incorrect, assumption among all the Hyuga present. He is aware of the Byakugan's blind spot. They were thinking as one. Agreed, Horensa spoke through gritted teeth. There's one more thing. His killing intent flooded the room again, stronger than ever. If you seal her, or even threaten to seal her, she and the Uchiha will have something in common, because I will kill every Hyuga over the age of 11. But if she goes missing one night and I have even the slightest suspicion that a Hyuga is to blame, the Hyuga clan will perish. I'm going to wipe out the entire clan. The guys. The children and the women. Or maybe I'll just kill the children and those who don't have any, leaving the parents to bury their sons and daughters. Allow them to live with the knowledge that their babies are no longer alive and that it is entirely their fault. This statement was met with silence. Horensa smirked unexpectedly. You wouldn't do it. Hinata is overly concerned with her family. You'd hurt her if you did that. Yurei simply shrugged. Not nearly as much as you do. She'll get over it eventually, after all. After all, when have any of you ever done her a favor? And you? Yurei knelt down and stabbed Hiashi in the chest. You will behave like a father should. I'm not sure why I have to tell you this, but try to act like you love your daughter. Hiashi's eyes were filled with fire. You're wrong, he snarled. Oh? How so? I adore my daughter. Yurei slapped Hiashi across the face with her backhand. Don't lie to me, he said sarcastically. It isn't a lie. Hiashi yelled, oblivious to the red welt on his face. Yurei simply stared at him. I'll reveal a secret to you, Hiashi, he said condescendingly. Hinata is not convinced. Hiashi jerked back, as if struck. That had hit him harder than anything else Yurei had said. Furthermore, Hiashi-sama. I've been in your daughter's bedrooms. Hanabi is full of expensive gifts and photographs. She even has photos of you actually smiling. Then there's Hinata's quarters. The only way to tell it's hers is the stuffed fox toy on her bed, the different painting scheme, and the picture of her mother that she keeps hidden away in fear that it will be taken away from her, just like so many other precious things she once had. You mentioned that she had to earn them back. Tell me about Hiashi. Do you truly believe she believes you love her? Hiashi bowed his head. Well. Are we on the same page? Scowling, the Hyuga elders nodded. Good. Take a seat. They stayed where they were. Yurei made a pain signal with his hands. They rose to their feet. Yurei satisfiedly nodded. Activate. They were paralyzed once more, this time standing straight. Naruto approached them and drew a red line across their throats with the kunai he had prepared hours before. That ink is unique. It can be concealed with genjutsu, but the Hyuga eyes will detect it. On bended knee, the entire Hyuga clan will apologize to Hinata tomorrow morning. If you do this, you will be given the only substance that will remove the ink without making it poisonous. Or you'll have to live with the embarrassment of wearing it around your neck for the rest of your life. He turned to walk away. You'll be here until sunrise. The paralyzing seal I've painted on you will fade as the sun rises. Naruto had easily copied the seal from his father's book. Takashi spoke up, surprising everyone except Naruto. 2 seals were placed on them. One to halt movement, one to halt speech. He had normally activated both at the same time. Then the others are still alive. Naruto, also known as Yurei to them, shook his head. No. After all, this was just a warning. Every one of you will be able to move again by sunrise. Do you consider yourself a Namikaze? Naruto raised a brow at him. Why would I ever tell you that? Minato loved me, and I still do, even though he's gone. The village practically worships the Yondaime Hokage as if he were a minor god, yet I see how you treat his son, the Namikaze heir. What difference does it make whether I'm a Namikaze or not? This statement was met with stunned silence. Hiashi, in particular, was taken aback. He'd known Minato for a long time, mostly through business as clan head and Hokage. Despite this, Minato was one of the best friends he'd ever had. He had no idea he was the father of a son. Why do you inquire? Yurei, the man they knew, asked. The Namikaze were known by their enemies for their flashy jutsu and for being good friends but terrible enemies. Their friends also knew them for another talent, lethal assassination. They would have been known for the same thing if it hadn't been for their deadly assassination skills. The Namikaze clan is also known for something else. Honor. A Namikaze would never ask someone to do something that they themselves would not do, Naruto stated. But, above all, they would do anything for their family, for those who were dear to them. He moved behind them, watching as their gazes followed him. As they heard the steely rasp of his katana being drawn, their mouths dried up. To demonstrate your noble status, you Hyuga grow your hair long. To demonstrate that you are a clan of honor. He cut off each Hyuga's hair in one wide slash, dipping and lifting his sword as he did so, leaving their hair cut at the nape of their neck. You have no respect. Despite these words, he removed the paper seal from the back of their necks. However, I do. As a result, I will not constantly threaten you with a torture seal. But since I'm furious that you did it to the cadet branch. The Gazebo Jutsu knocked them all to the ground when Yurei waved his hand in front of him. Yurei exhaled a sigh of relief, turned, and walked towards the door. He came to a halt just as he was about to leave. Perhaps I am a Namikaze, perhaps I am not. It makes no difference. Hinata spent the night at Kurenai Yuhi's house. She'll arrive a few hours after sunrise. The entire clan will be present when she returns. They will all apologize to her for the wrongs they have done in the past. They will also apologize on their knees. Either you or I will enforce this. Oh, and one more thing. The Namikaze heir, as well as Hinata, are under my protection, and I would appreciate it if word of his existence was not spread throughout the village. If you touch either of them, I guarantee you will be sorry. So saying, he walked out of the dojo. Within a few hours, the entire clan was in uproar. Naruto had made certain that the Fuin seal was painted on each and every Hyuga in the household. Shadow clones were extremely useful. And every Hyuga who had ever harmed Hinata had awoken to find a terrifying figure standing over them, holding a katana to their throats, only to discover that they were completely powerless. Naruto shorn everyone he discovered had ever beaten Hinata. When Hinata had completely broken down, Naruto had made a copy of any of the names she had sobbed out. He didn't press her for answers, but he did get them. It was then a simple matter to use a couple of shadow clones in Hiashi's office to figure out who lived where. An emergency meeting was called for the entire clan. The newly shorn Hyuga were especially enraged. Their fear, however, outweighed their rage. They finally reached a decision after much deliberation. Anko had decided against walking Hinata to the Hyuga clan compound, instead climbing a tree and looking down at the Hyuga clan grounds through a telescope she had stolen from Jiraiya a long time ago. She stared wide-eyed as Hinata walked through the gates and the entire clan kneeled in front of her. "Kami above," she said quietly. He completed the task. It was the little punk who did it. When Hinata finally left the land of dreams to return to the land of the living, the sun had just begun to rise. She tensed as soon as she opened her eyes. This was not her space. She sat bolt upright, her heart pounding furiously and her eyes darting around, trying to figure out where she was. She sank back into bed with a sigh of relief. She was familiar with the location in the wallpaper. She was at Kurenai residence. Sans, but why is that? Why was she here instead of at home? Hinata reflected on the past. Flashback. Hinata's pearly lavender eyes welled up with tears as she pressed her face against Naruto's dampening jacket. Sobbing, she poured her heart out to her crush, leaving nothing out, telling him everything that had happened to her. That was what they had done to her. Hinata had never seen Naruto-kun like this before. Instead of becoming enraged and charging off to bash some heads, he simply stayed with her. He stayed with her, stroking her back and soothing her bruised soul as he listened to her words and comforted her broken spirit. He was simply there for her, a shoulder to cry on during her emotional breakdown. Naruto said little to nothing and only spoke when her crying stopped. He then asked her for the names of everyone who had done this to her. Hinata had simply frozen at this point. She was unable to tell him. What would they do to her if they discovered she had lied to them? But, in Naruto's arms, the possibility of anything bad happening to her had simply vanished. She felt safe in his grasp, with his arms wrapped around her. That's what she'd told him. Name after name had fallen from her lips, as had the details of what each of them had done to her. She burst into tears again after the third name, but Naruto was there, his hand stroking her hair, assisting her in gaining a release from all the pain and sorrow she had bottled up in her heart, a release that was sorely needed. She finally stopped sobbing about 2 hours later, her tears having long since dried. She just lay there for a moment, suddenly ashamed that Naruto had been holding her like this for so long, that she had let him see what was buried within her. She looked up into his face, her eyes drooping as sleep engulfed her. "Don't worry, Hinata-chan. I'll take care of things. I'll fix this." Hinata noticed the tenderness in his eyes, but also something else, a fire hidden deep within its depths. A fierce determination and a barely contained rage. The flashback is over. Hinata gulped. She was hoping Naruto wouldn't do anything stupid. However, chances are he was planning on doing exactly that. Throwing off her covers, Hinata hopped lightly off the bed, only to shriek as she stepped on a bristled brush that had been left on the floor. Kurenai rushed into the room, only to find her student hopping on one foot, swearing silently if her expression was any indication. Anko walked in right behind Kurenai, snickering at Hinata's expression. She had accidentally left the brush where Hinata was likely to step on it when she got out of bed. At the very least, she did not use a brush with sharp bristles. Or the one with poisonous tips. Kurenai stated the obvious, "Hinata. You're awake. How do you feel?" Hinata simply paused for a moment, attempting to sort out her emotions for herself. They were all just so muddled right now. "Better," she murmured quietly. "Not great, but better than I was yesterday." Physically, that was true. There wasn't a single cut, bruise, or mark on her pale skin, which made Kurenai wonder what was in the cream Naruto had given her. But she was still convinced that the elders and her father would make sure she couldn't be with Naruto-kun. And it was this that hurt her the most. But, at the very least, she had explained why. He would not have been as hurt if she had suddenly stopped avoiding him. They couldn't really do anything else. Hinata had initially assumed that she would disregard what they had told her come hell or high water. They were also threatening to put the caged bird seal on Naruto. She could not allow it. That meant she'd have to stay away from Naruto. But first things first. "Anyo, how did I get here?" she wondered. "Blondie carried you over, and he seemed as mad as hell about what happened to you." Hinata blushed in response to Anko's language. Anko gave an evil grin. "I believe he likes you." Eep. Hinata turned a brick red, causing Anko to roar with laughter. She came to a halt when she noticed Hinata's eyes prickling with tears. "What's the matter, girl? You shouldn't be so upset about a boy liking you." "It happens," she mused, her gaze sweeping over Hinata. "It would probably happen a lot more often if you wore some different clothes." Ow. Kurenai punched her in the head. "That's not it." Hinata almost yelled, her stutter gone in her panic. I know Naruto likes me as a friend, nothing more, nothing less, but that's what makes it so difficult. Anko tensed as he heard these words. They were too close to words she had heard many times before. I never thought you were one of those haughty Hyuga pricks, girl, Anko said, her voice as cold as a grave. I guess I was wrong, she said as she deliberately turned her back on Hinata, catching the full force of Kurenai's arm behind her open-handed slap. Anko took a surprised step back, her stance astonished as she looked at Kurenai, who simply radiated fury. Look at her, Anko. Look at her, Kurenai said as she grabbed Anko's shoulders and spun her around. Hinata had collapsed to the ground, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She began speaking in a very calm, soft voice, and the two older women had no trouble hearing her. It's not that. It's not at all. Naruto-kun is the first real friend I've ever had. I care for him, probably more than I care for anyone else. But the elders don't like him. My father doesn't like him either. If I keep being friends with him, they'll hurt him. I don't mind if they hurt me. Not really, they've done it often enough. But if I keep being his friend, they'll. Kurenai approached her and gently rubbed her back. Anko, on the other hand, remained where she was for a while, rubbing a very specific point above her right collarbone. Her very own curse. She was well aware of this girl's predicament. But she was also aware of the boy's predicament. That was something she understood all too well. Anko was kneeling by Hinata's side in a few short steps. Anko raised her face to meet the girl's gaze, one hand on her chin and the other on her upper arm. Not going to happen, Anko stated calmly. Hinata hung her head, silently rejecting Anko's assurances. Anko simply shook her gently. Listen to me, girl. Your family cannot do that to Naruto. For starters, he's a friend of the Hokage. Hell, the old man looks at him like a grandson and he'd have a fit. The old man may not be as deadly as he used to be, but let me tell you this. There is no one in your entire clan who would even stand a chance against him. And besides that, your clan would not dare put that seal on Nar. The rest of Konoha's clans would be very concerned if the Hyuga clan gained complete control of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. It could even spark a civil war in the village. They wouldn't be as concerned if it were a normal child. So, don't be concerned about the seal or anything. It's not going to happen. Hinata snorted and wiped her tears. But if I stay with him, they'll still hurt him, she sighed. Perhaps it would be best if I just stayed away, she said slowly. That might be for the best, she reasoned. I will not allow them to harm Naruto-kun because of my frailty. Anko slowly nodded. She was aware. She didn't like it, but she understood. But she knew it was probably the worst decision she could make at this point. But how do you make Hinata see it? Anko frowned slightly. She didn't do the nice and caring thing. She had no idea what to do in this situation. But she could make an attempt. You know, Anko said slowly, mulling over what she was going to say. You could be right. Maybe he won't get hurt. At least not physically. Hinata looked up at Anko, puzzled. Tell me, girl, how do you think it would feel to go through your life without anyone? Anko inquired quietly. Looking around you every day and seeing every other person, every other being with a companion, a friend, a family? Loneliness. Complete and utter loneliness. It is a torture so sharp, so excruciating, that only those who have felt its poisonous bite can ever truly have a semblance of understanding at how painful it really is. It's like constantly being shut up in a dark place, with no light, not even a chink. Me? I was strong, but not that strong. But the best thing in the world for a person in that situation is when they find a light in the form of a person who accepts them for who they are. A friend. Sometimes it means that they'll hold on tightly to that person, because they never want to go that dark place again. What do you think will happen to Naruto if you decide to abandon him? Anko cast a self-conscious glance at the two other females who were staring at her. She shifted nervously, slightly embarrassed by how much of herself she had revealed during her little monologue. She snorted her way to Kurenai's fridge. "Well, that's just my opinion," she said as she rummaged around inside. "But you're a big girl, ah," she exclaimed, pulling out a beer with a triumphant grin. Anko twisted off the bottle cap and chugged half the bottle in one go, ignoring Kurenai's protests that it was too early for that sort of thing. She needed a drink after letting loose like that. Breakfast was simple. A couple of slices of toast with jam. Hinata remained silent the entire time, clearly thinking about Anko's words. Kurenai attempted to make small talk, obviously in an attempt to lighten the mood. Anko sat and ruminated, another beer in her hand. It wasn't long before it was time to go. Kurenai led Hinata to the door and raised an eyebrow at Anko, silently asking if she wanted to accompany her. Anko simply shook her head. She had no place in the Hyuga compound. But that didn't mean she wasn't going to make sure she could see the outcome of her bet with Blondie. Hinata paused as she walked out the door, looking back. "Kurenai-san, please excuse me, I have something I need to do," Kurenai said, looking curiously at her daughter figure, who walked back into the house and stood in front of Anko in a few short steps. Anko challenged Hinata before blinking in surprise when the heiress bowed down to her. "Thank you, Anko-san. I can't tell you how much your words help me," she said softly, without stuttering. She turned around and walked back to the softly smiling Kurenai before they both left for the Hyuga compound. Hinata was once again silent as she walked back to her house. It wasn't a house. A home was a place where you were cared for and loved. A home is a safe haven where you can be yourself and be who you are. The Hyuga clan compound was not a place to live. It was just a place where she lived. But it could become a home one day. Hinata remembered Naruto saying he would fix everything. That he would take care of this, which made her slightly concerned. Naruto-kun had a habit of rushing in without stopping to think. However, this was one of the reasons she liked him. She had already decided that she would remain with Naruto no matter what. Anko had assisted her in seeing that this was the best option. Besides, she didn't want to return to that dark place. The two females got closer to the Hyuga gates. Hinata could see the familiar white robes of the two Hyuga guards at the compound's gate ahead of her. At this distance, it was only possible to see that one of them had gone inside, most likely to deliver a message. Hinata felt a small flutter of fear deep within her belly before ruthlessly suppressing it. She was not going to let them change her mind. Despite her feelings, she slowly took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for the ordeal that lay ahead of her. The fact that the guards had been looking for her with the Byakugan was a bad omen. "Don't worry, Hinata. I'm right here beside you. Stay strong," Hinata said, nodding. She would persevere. The second guard returned just as the two fairer sex approached the gates. Kurenai was cautious, very cautious. The closer she got to the compound, the more uneasy she felt. That feeling washed over the Hyuga house in waves. She slowed as she got close enough to the guards to take a closer look, one hand on Hinata's shoulder pulling her away from them. The guards were extremely tense. They were Hyuga, and they were emotional. Kurenai reached out with her senses, her eyes widening as she felt the ever-so-subtle sensation of a small, well-placed genjutsu. She immediately took out a kunai. "Hinata, get behind me," she said calmly, her voice soft and icy. Despite being startled, Hinata obeyed without question. Kurenai demanded, "Who are you?" Kurenai was looked at with suspicion by the two guards. "We are this morning's guards," one of them drawled, as if speaking to someone much younger and dumber than him. Kurenai slapped her hands together, scowling. The eyes of both guards widened. "No. Dawn. Kai." Kurenai extinguished the genjutsu. She was surprised to see the same two guards standing in front of them as before. She noticed a red mark running across each of their throats as she looked at them closely. Kurenai's eyes widened as she noticed the mark's placement. If a blade had been used, it would have cut through both jugular veins and severed the windpipe, resulting in a quick and silent death. In short, it resembled a flawless assassination attempt. One of the security guards hissed quietly. "It makes sense," he thought. Of course, the genjutsu mistress of Konoha would be able to tell whether or not we were using a genjutsu to conceal the mark of our shame, said the other guard. "I assure you, Yuhi-san, we are all who we appear to be, and we would appreciate it if you could dispel this particular henge for the last time." Kurenai nodded slowly. The guards rebuilt their henge and led Hinata and Kurenai into the compound. Hinata almost let out a squeak when she noticed the entire clan standing in the clearing in front of the house. Her mind was racing as she tried to recall the few things that required the entire clan as witnesses. The only one she could think of at this point was banishment. Hinata's father was the first in the crowd, directly in front of the Hyuga elders. "Hinata," Hiashi explained. Hinata's first reaction was to flinch. But she stifled this instinct and stood tall in front of her father and the rest of the Hyuga clan. She had promised herself that she would not give up. She would keep her promise. "Yes, father?" she inquired, her voice a little forced, but firm and questioning. "For a long time, the elders and I have said that you were not worthy of being the heir of the Hyuga clan, that you were not worthy of being a Hyuga." Kurenai became tense, not liking where this was going. Her intuition was screaming at her that this was a trap. Apart from herself and Hinata, everyone else in the area was under a henge. It wasn't a position that any ninja would want. But, as she strained her genjutsu sensing to the limit, she noticed that they all had the majority of their chakra centered around their necks. Despite this, she gradually relaxed her muscles, preparing them for explosive movement. She had no idea what was going on, but whatever it was, she would not be caught off guard. She was all set for anything. Hiashi kept speaking. "We berated you, pulled you down, and constantly insulted you, all of us, in our efforts to mold you into our image of what we thought the Hyuga heiress should be." The rest of the Hyugas nodded in agreement, their faces expressionless. When you still retained your kindness and shy nature, extra training sessions were introduced in the hopes that you would become more confident, but you proceeded to become shyer, and you never lost your kind nature. Despite this, or perhaps because of this, you were an outcast amongst your own clan. Unaccepted and abused. Hinata remained silent, not flinching or showing any sign that her father's words had affected her. Because of this, Hiashi continued quietly, "We ask for your forgiveness." Hinata and Kurenai were taken aback by Hiashi's words. Hinata exclaimed as her father knelt in front of her. Behind him, the rest of the Hyuga clan knelt and touched their brows to the ground. "We were the ones who were wrong and committed many injustices against your person. Yesterday was the first time that you acted as the Hyuga heiress that we wished for, when you defied both the elders and myself. You showed the type of strength that is rare in this world. You may have been capable of this strength throughout your life, if we had not stunted your growth. We have failed as a clan in helping you grow. And I have failed as a father. Hiashi Hyuga, clan head of the Hyuga clan, the strongest clan in Konoha, the mightiest of hidden villages, said as he bowed down to his daughter, wishing his hair was longer so he could hide the beginnings of tears welling up in his eyes. He heard a small thud in the background, similar to someone collapsing in a faint. Hiashi activated his Byakugan without lifting his head from the ground and saw Hinata staring in shock at the bowed heads of the entire Hyuga clan, ignoring the unconscious form of her mentor on the ground beside her. Naruto was walking down one of Konoha's main streets, ignoring the usual dirty looks he received along the way. He was particularly pleased with himself. He'd been able to leave a couple of hanged clones in the Hyuga compound, giving him a bird's eye view of everything. Although it had been awkward when Hinata had recovered from the shock of the entire situation and began to, Naruto's thoughts were abruptly cut off as a rope suddenly wrapped around his neck. Shit. Kurenai wandered out of the Hyuga compound in a daze. She had never expected anything like that to happen in 1,000 years. It was unfathomable. Unexplainable. It was. Damn it all to hell, it was so completely perplexing. What on earth could have caused the entire Hyuga clan to get down on their knees and apologize to anyone, least of all Hinata? Kurenai smirked. Only if it would increase the clan's status or if both the elders and Hiashi had ordered it, would the clan act in concert like that. Even so, Kurenai doubted that a regular order from the elders and clan heads would be enough to debase the Hyugas. Kurenai's eyes widened and she exclaimed. There was possibly one more thing that would compel the entire clan to act in unison. Fear. But that was impossible. To accomplish that, one would have had to threaten the entire Hyuga clan's population. But then, Kurenai's thoughts returned to the two long red marks that appeared to be almost painted across the two Hyuga guards' throats, in the ideal position for a silent kill. She remembered feeling the genjutsu on every Hyuga in the compound, all of whom were hiding something in the same spot. Kurenai swallowed, now that he saw it. It was a forewarning. Someone or something had demonstrated to the Hyuga clan that if he or she so desired, he or she could have killed each and every one of them. But who would be capable of doing so? It was supposed to be impossible to infiltrate the Hyuga compound. Especially since they have all-seeing eyes on the compound. Kurenai raised her head. Obviously, it wasn't impossible, and wondering who could do something like that would get her nowhere. Kurenai had never heard of an assassin doing something like that just to help Hinata. And it was clear that this was done for Hinata. And the only people who knew what had happened to her the girl were her, Anko, and Naruto. Anko had spent the night at her house, so she was out. Unless she had some very unusual sleeping habits, Kurenai knew she had nothing to do with it. Naruto, the Academy's last survivor, was all that remained. He couldn't possibly pull something like this off. It was not only far beyond his skill level, but it also appeared to be far too subtle for him to pull off. Even so, a nagging doubt lingered in Kurenai's mind and refused to go away. She had arrived at her destination. She moved quickly to the flowers on the windowsill after opening the front door. Watering them always seemed to help her think. She sighed and began going over what she knew about Naruto. He was an annoying, hyperactive child with far too much energy and enthusiasm. He always wore a bright orange jumpsuit, as if he wanted people to notice him right away. He had recently become a good friend of Hinata's and was assisting her in coming out of her shell. He was also completely unaware and a little bit cheeky. Overall, he appeared to be an ordinary kid most of the time. Kurenai bit her lower lip. No, he wasn't your average kid. Not by any means. Kurenai quickly picked up on all the minor details. The minor details she had overlooked. When she first saw him carrying Hinata, he was dressed in a black ensemble with a hood that perfectly concealed his features, ideal for an assassination. Then there was the fact that he knew far more about her than he should have. And his words. He kept it hidden well, but every now and then he said something that revealed that he was not who he pretended to be. What they don't realize is that while they're not looking at me, I'm always looking at them, he said, motioning for Kurenai to take the unconscious Hinata from him. I don't want her to get into trouble, and the Hyuga clan will be furious if they see her with the demon brat. And then there was last night. Kami above, how could she have forgotten about last night? Naruto had come through the door, showing a knowledge of Anko that was more complete than what they had for her in the bingo books. Anko was included in the bingo books after castrating a daimyo's son with a spoon. Her only words on the subject were, he had it coming. Not only that, but after matching her killie, he had. Flashback. Naruto shook his head as he finished his story about what had happened to Hinata. I'll kill them, Kurenai said furiously through gritted teeth. I had already considered it. You would never be forgiven by Hinata. Or me, he concluded darkly. End of flashback. Kurenai had dismissed the words as incongruous at the time, certain that he had said them in jest. But, looking back, the blonde kid had been completely serious. He really did want to kill them, but Hinata would not have forgiven him, so he had done the next best thing, or got someone else to do it for him. Either way, Kurenai murmured to herself. Naruto Uzumaki is a lot more dangerous. As he was hauled off his feet with a jerk by the rope, which sharply pulled him deep into an alley, his unseen foe acted quickly, yanking him to his feet before grabbing him close to her with an arm around his neck. Naruto acted instinctively. Immediately sending chakra to his limbs to strengthen them, he arched his hips and threw himself forward, breaking free of the hold. Falling to his hands as he did so, he used them as the support necessary to bring his legs round as he lashed out in a kick behind him.
His opponent, however, jumped back, pulling on the rope around Naruto's neck, sending him crashing to the ground.
Naruto couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, impressed by her skill. Catching an augmented kunai was a risky business, especially if said augmentation was wind chakra. And yes, it was definitely a her, wearing a skin-tight black bodysuit underneath a large baggy-sleeved coat, which revealed tantalizing glimpses of a well-curved figure and a pair of pert. No. Not a pervert, nonetheless, he blushed slightly at the remembered feeling of softness as she had held him close to take advantage of Naruto's agitation, before charging forward. Kid? This isn't the time to be thinking about these things right now, Shinigami said quietly as Naruto moved his head to the side, missing the kunai swing by a hair's breadth. He ducked once more, trying to avoid the blade in his opponent's hand. Naruto cursed the academy rules prohibiting him from possessing any real weapons until he graduated. Next time, disregard the rules, he reasoned. I'm not going out of the house unarmed. The rope, kid. Naruto mentally thanked Shinigami and kicked the ground in front of him, creating a cloud of dust with wind chakra that shielded him from view for the time being. He reasoned that he had more than enough time to bend down and pick up the rope from the ground. The boot to the chin said otherwise. Naruto used the momentum provided by the kick to perform a backflip, gaining some distance from his opponent. He charged right away, weaving to the side to avoid another kunai swing, which was handled as if the person knew a lot about how to use it. It has no elemental composition. Got it. Naruto used his short stature to his advantage, getting under the masked nin's arm and driving his fist into her solar plexus, frowning as she arched her back to avoid taking all of the damage. He couldn't have put his full body weight behind the punch because he was too close to her, but the chakra he had pumped into his limb should have been enough to slow her down. He hoped. Naruto grunted as he felt an elbow hammer down on the muscle above his right collarbone. He needed to concentrate. The fight never stopped moving. You had to be completely aware of your surroundings at all times. Because he hadn't been paying attention above him, his adversary brought her elbow down in a pumping motion, attempting to paralyze his arm. She had made a mistake. It wasn't completely accurate, but it was enough to knock Naruto back a step, allowing the kunai to be used again. Naruto reached out instinctively, and caught it by the blade. The blade was quickly retracted, which would have resulted in a deep gash in Naruto's palm. If it had moved, it would have. Or maybe if Naruto hadn't wrapped the rope used to choke him several times around his hand. Naruto heard a gasp as he pressed his other forearm into the crook of her elbow, forcing her arm up and allowing him to disarm her. Not to be outdone, his opponent bent backwards and kicked Naruto's hand, sending the kunai spinning up into the air. Another kick with the same leg sent Naruto stumbling back a pace, and she caught the kunai by its handle once more. The next 30 seconds were spent in a frenzy of taijutsu, with Naruto forced to use the frog kumite to keep up. His opponent used a highly flexible, sinuous taijutsu that seemed tailor-made for fighting the frog kumite. Naruto was only able to keep up by throwing in a couple of brawling moves, utilizing his unpredictability to the fullest extent, and his own pure-headed stubbornness. The rope, while well made, was fraying from being used to constantly block the slashes that were sent his way. The healing factor could have also aided in the battle. Just a smidgen on no. I'll need a new jacket after this, Naruto grumbled. But his opponent was not entirely unscathed. Naruto had still managed to land a few powerful blows. Even so, she wasn't even slowing down, and he was still young. This could go on for a long time.
However, her body language at this point did not indicate desperation, anger, or any other negative emotion.
Shinigami claimed that her body language indicated satisfaction. May I use jutsu now? Naruto inquired, irritably. I said no. The only ones you know right now are too recognizable, or they'll kill your opponent outright, which you don't want, especially if this is who I think it is. Besides, she's got a nice rack. Naruto began. I'm going to tell Arlia you said that when she gets back. Shit. And if he doesn't, I'm going to tell her. Double shock. What do you mean? Arlia stated. Shinigami whimpered, and of course, triple shit, Kyuubi laughed as he let go of the illusion, and Naruto tuned them out before anything else happened. Baka Kitsune. Or, at the very least, he tried. Naruto snorted once more, but he was not going to let this distraction cost him. Instead, Naruto was looking for an opening. He had an idea that just might work. If only he could, there. Bringing his hand round in a sharp movement, he whipped the rope bound to his hand around, the frayed end connecting solidly with his enemy's eyes. As she blinked in shock, her hand automatically going to her face, Naruto struck. Too smart to stay still in such a vulnerable position, his opponent leapt back, performing a small series of hand signs before thrusting her arms forward. Snakes erupted from her baggy sleeves and completely entangled Naruto, tying him tightly. Naruto struggled for a few seconds before smirking and changing into a log with a puff of smoke. When Anko awoke, she had been unmasked, unarmed, and securely and efficiently tied up. The room she was in was quite Spartan, with light blue walls and a single chair, which was currently occupied. She raised an eyebrow at her captor, who was sitting in front of her munching on a bowl of ramen. And when I say efficiently tied, I mean that she was covered in rope pretty much from head to toe. She looked at her captor for a moment, curious, as if he was talking to himself, or rather, as if he was having a conversation with several others she couldn't hear. Okay, boys. So, what do I do with her now? Ero Baka. Naruto turned a bright red worthy of Hinata. That's not going to happen. No kidding fuzz, but I already knew this was going to make things more difficult. He frowned. No, we can't kill the crazy snake lady. At this, Anko made herself known by clearing her throat a little. Naruto jumped as he turned and saw that the purple-haired woman was awake, mentally berating himself for not noticing that she had woken up, as well as for talking out loud instead of in his head. Don't be too hard on yourself, young man. You haven't been getting enough sleep lately, have you? Naruto sighed and looked at Anko, puzzled. Do the voices in your head bother you? Anko blinked, then shook her head slowly. Isn't all of this a little bit excessive? She asked wryly, shrugging her shoulders and gesticulating at the various measures being used to keep her in check. Naruto simply shook his head. Not at all, Naruto responded. Let's just call it a compliment to my respect for your ability, and the chakra seals happened to be on me at the time, he shrugged. I'm not a big fan of the concept of overkill. Anko laughed. Wouldn't it have anything to do with that ruse you pulled with the Hyuga clan? Naruto smiled deceptively. Tell me, Anko-san, what could I possibly do to the mighty Hyuga clan as the dead last academy student? Anko openly laughed at him. You've forgotten that I just fought with you, kid. Seriously. Look at my academy records. It clearly states that I am a hopeless student with no potential to be a ninja who will most likely be killed on his first C-rank mission. Anko simply stared at him. Bullshit, as I previously stated, I just fought with you. Perhaps you're not as good as you think you are, Naruto musingly suggested. Anko's face flushed. Oi. Keep an eye on it, kid, or all. Or what, Anko-san? In case you haven't noticed, you don't exactly have a lot of advantages right now, Naruto deadpanned. Anko blinked, looking down on herself. The kid had a point. At the time, her hands were tied. Ah, touch a copyright, but you have to let me go sooner or later, and when you do. Well, that'll be interesting, won't it? What do you mean? Naruto inquired cautiously. For example, Anko said, a lazy smile spreading across her face. There's nothing stopping me from informing your academy teachers or the Hokage about your true potential, and I'm sure the Hyuga clan will be curious about what, or who, happened last night. Naruto's thoughts were racing. He was well aware that none of Anko's accusations would be taken seriously by the Hyuga clan or his academy teachers. But he was unsure what would happen if Anko told old man Sarutobi. Naruto had been avoiding him since his return. It was strange because most people would have assumed that Naruto would have visited Sarutobi first, but this was not the case. Naruto had made peace with the old man's death a long time ago, though it had taken some time. The third Hokage, on the other hand, had been like a grandfather to him, one of Naruto's most precious people. When he died, it was as if a piece of Naruto died along with him. But now that his grandfather was back, Naruto was scared. I'm afraid to see him again, afraid to know him again. Then there was the fact that the third had known him for the longest time, possibly longer than Tuchi and Ayame. He also had a better understanding of him than anyone else. Naruto was certain that he would notice that he had changed in the short time that they hadn't seen each other. So, while Anko's plan would have no immediate impact on him, it would result in him being closely monitored. And with everything he did, not to mention the places he went and the training he did, being watched would raise a number of awkward questions. Hey kid, just remind me, I've got this one covered. Grasping at straws, Naruto unconsciously repeated what the fox said. It wasn't the brightest idea he'd ever had. That may be true, Anko-san, but as you stated, I still have to let you go. However, I don't want you to find out where I hid you, so I'll probably have to knock you out first. Where you wake up depends entirely on you. For example, you could wake up in your bed. Anko frowned. She opened her mouth to ask a question but was cut off before she could finish. 17 Hashirama Road, apartment 203, Naruto continued, barely pausing to catch his breath. Anko's mouth clicked shut with a loud click. That was her postal address. Or, Naruto said, his voice devoid of emotion. You could wake up in a S&M outfit, tied up in the men's onsen. Naruto almost choked on the words. Ero Kitsune. He roared in his head as the demon fox and the death god rolled around on the floor, laughing their asses off. But none of them were expecting what happened next. Anko's face softened into a smile. Wow, she reflected. Kinky. You're a little young to be into that sort of stuff, but... Her grin became feral at this point. Do your absolute worst. Naruto dripped sweat. That was surprising. However, this was the insane snake lady. Who now thought he was a pervert? Whose attention he had recently gained. Oh, Kami-sama, who was looking at him as if she wasn't sure whether filleting or some other mentally scarring, trauma-causing method would be the best way to deal with him. Help. Shinigami shrugged before making a suggestion that had Naruto looking at him with something resembling reverence. Kyuubi simply nodded. That would do it. Naruto looked appreciatively at Anko, who was apparently thinking about it, as he marveled at his top-tier acting abilities. Alright, he said, eliciting a stunned expression from Anko before she quickly managed to school her features. But that means we'll have to wait about an hour, Anko said, blinking. She hadn't expected that. Oh? And why is that? She inquired, her feral grin widening. Naruto shrugged before a grin that matched, then surpassed, hers in ferocity appeared on his face. Because, if I recall correctly, that's when an old man who has recently returned to Konoha usually goes to the onsen. Anko cocked his brow. And, please tell me, who is this man? Naruto leaned in with his hand on his chin, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, I didn't really catch his name, but he's almost twice my height, was wearing this weird outfit, and he had long spiky hair. Anko began to perspire slightly. It couldn't possibly be. Could it? She nervously cleared her throat. What color was this man's hair? She inquired, desperately trying to keep her grin on her face. White. Anko felt her smile fall off her face like mud. Naruto's next words drained all the blood from her face, leaving it as pale as her old mentor's. He referred to himself as the Toad Sage. Naruto stood there, slightly awestruck, as the strong woman was reduced to a quivering mess. Even he would admit that this was extremely dirty fighting, but he never expected Anko to react so negatively to the thinly veiled threat. How could he have known Jiraiya had vowed vengeance on Anko ever since she had stolen his telescope? He had yet to collect his vengeance. As a result, this reaction only reinforced his belief that Ero Sennin was a super pervert of the highest order. Why you wouldn't dare, she said, her face solemn. Fear. 2, to be exact. A dash of disgust was thrown into the mix. The blonde's grin widened even more. Try me. Anko appeared to deflate slightly. Okay, I won't tell anyone about anything. Are you happy? Naruto smiled. Very. Anko shifted uncomfortably with a put-on sigh. Can you get me out of here now? Naruto smirked. Excuse me a second, I'll need to think about it, he said as he exited the room, closing the door behind him. The room opened up to a familiar corridor, which meant Naruto had plenty of space to carry out his plan. Naruto sat down and assumed the lotus position, taking a few deep breaths. As Naruto entered his mindscape, the real world faded and was blown away like mist. When he awoke, Shinigami and Kyuubi were both sitting on the couch, playing on something the Death God referred to as a Xbox. Naruto paled dramatically as he saw the fox seemingly free. "What the fuck is he doing out here?" screamed Naruto, slightly incoherently. Shinigami simply waved at him over his shoulder. "Relax, kid. Kyuubi is still imprisoned. I just needed someone to play co-op with." Naruto frowned as he examined the fox more closely. He quickly realized that the fox was not the one who had appeared in his nightmares since they began 3 years ago. Or was it? Well, forget it. The dynamics of time travel were simply too perplexing to contemplate for extended periods of time. It gave you a headache you couldn't believe was possible. Instead, Kyuubi resembled an anthro, a cross between a human and a fox, with a lot more human detail on the hands, allowing his claws to handle the small buttons on his controller. Kyuubi was turning his back on him. Dai Covenant scum. Naruto shivered. "So, how do you think I should handle Anko?" Shinigami paused the game, much to Kyuubi's chagrin, and turned to Naruto. "Well, I think you should, censored, and censored, before you, censored, as long as you have her tied up." Naruto gagged slightly, attempting to stop all of the blood from flowing to his head. Come on, dude. I'm only 11 years old. I'm way too young for that. Well, technically speaking. You're almost 17 years old. And you've never purposefully kissed a girl yet. Kyuubi muttered, a small grin crossing his face. Ow, low blow. Naruto's brow developed a tick mark. That game could be played by 2 people. "Hello Arlia. Please don't hurt him too much." Shinigami let out a little girl-like yelp before looking around, only to find no one there. He fixed his gaze on Naruto, his face pale. "Don't do that." Shinigami yelled at the boy and the immortal demon lord, who were both laughing themselves to death. "Kami's above. You were so whipped," chuckled Kyuubi. "Alright," Naruto said, wiping away a tear. "In all seriousness, what am I going to do with the snake lady?" Shinigami groaned. "Look, at this point, she'll either become an ally or an enemy. We can't afford to have her as an enemy, so you'll have to make her an ally, which may mean showing her a couple of things you'd rather keep hidden." Naruto exhaled a sigh. "Alright, I see what you mean. See you boys soon," he said as he exited his mindscape and returned to reality. Naruto returned to Anko after a few moments, holding a peace offering in his hands. Anko immediately began drooling, as he usually does when confronted with a fresh bowl of ramen. "Dango," she reasoned. Naruto fixed his gaze on her. "Alright lady, stay still, I don't want to hurt you." Anko frowned at him but did not move, instead watching as the blonde flicked a wrist at her and all her ropes were suddenly cut, leaving her completely unharmed. Her pupils dilated. Such command of his element at such a young age. It was nearly unheard of. Anko rose slowly to her feet. "Didn't you have something to do with the Hyuga clan?" Naruto sighed and shrugged. "Most of the bastards can't show any emotion because the pole is stuck up their ass. All they needed was a little lesson, and I happen to be a good teacher when it comes to said lesson." "And what is that lesson?" Anko inquired, her voice tinged with curiosity. Naruto grinned maniacally as he handed the dango to Anko. "Humility. Naruto led Anko out of the room and towards the front door not long after she had finished her dango. "So, Blondie," Anko said, picking her teeth with one of her dango stick's pointed ends. "Where did you take me in the first place?" Naruto grinned. "This is my place," he said as he flung open the front door. Anko stepped outside, her hand shielding her from the bright light that seemed to come from everywhere. She took in her surroundings, blinking. She was standing on a wide plateau, surrounded by a wide open plain bordered by a small grove of trees. Anko was familiar with this location. It was, however, impossible. It would have made him if Naruto had been able to enter that building. Spinning around wildly to confirm her suspicion, she was confronted by Naruto Uzumaki's smirking face, framed by the backdrop of Konoha's village from the Hokage monument. "Why you? You're..." Anko stuttered. Naruto swept himself into a deep bow while twirling an imaginary cloak. "Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, at your service," Anko said as he looked at the fourth Hokage's son. "Well, screw me." Naruto grinned. "It's tempting, but no." A pair of burning gray eyes followed the Hyuga heiress around the clan compound. "Oh, you may think you're safe now because, thanks to Yurei, everyone is treating you like a human being, aren't they?" "No, it won't last. Yurei can't be everywhere. He can't know everything. Just wait. Because I'll be waiting, and when you least expect it." Kukakukuku. Hinata was dazed as she entered her room. She had no idea what had happened or how it had happened, but she was suspiciously certain it had something to do with Naruto. She walked into her room and softly closed her door before resting her forehead against it and closing her eyes. Things would be different now. They had no choice. Hinata turned around and gave a small jump at the figure lying on her bed. Who are you?" The figure, a stunning woman, smiled tenderly and motherly at Hinata. Nonetheless, an aura of power seemed to surround her like a robe. "Hello, Hinata. I am someone who hopes to be your friend. At this point, you could call me a spirit, as I am not up to my usual strength. But as to who I am the goddess of love and matrimony, wife of the Shinigami, lord of the dead, and daughter to Kami, who really doesn't need any introduction. But you? You can call me Arlia." Hinata slowly nodded her head. "Oh," she exclaimed. Hinata simply looked her over. "Do you want some tea?" To be honest, after everything that had happened to her today, this didn't come as much as a surprise.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.